Thank you. I'm doing speech number 2 from the Competent Communicator Manual, and it's the title of the speech is Commuting by Bike, and I'll just call on Terence, my evaluator, to read out a few of the goals for this speech.
The objective of the speech is to select an appropriate outline which allows listeners to easily follow and understand your speech. Make your message clear with supporting material directly contributing to that message. Use appropriate transitions when moving from one idea to another. Create a strong opening and conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll present to you Commuting by Bike. I've been undergoing a bit of an experiment over the last couple of months. I've been getting to work by bike. I haven't always commuted by bike. It's something that's been happening over the last 2 months. But I did have a big history of biking as a kid. In my early days, I was old enough to have had my first bike having a banana seat. Not old enough that was cool, but that's what I had. I used to ride to school by bike. In fact, in northern Canada, I was able to ride in the snow at times with some interesting results. When I came to Australia, I lived in North Epping, and I rode around on my 10-speed. I'm ashamed to say at this point that when I got my L's when I was 16, the bike sat beside the house and turned to rust. I never rode it again. Not once. I'm ashamed of that. It took about 15 years, but in Canada, I resumed my biking. I rode for pleasure in a city that's as flat as Sydney is hilly, Toronto. Great city for riding in. And I was riding with my wife. She actually was able to ride to work there. She was working close enough, and I was very envious of that. We had a great time for a few years there. But when we decided to come back to Sydney, we sold the bikes. We thought Sydney's not a city for riding bikes. And I thought that was going to be the end of it. But after a few months of commuting by train from where I'm living at the moment in Croydon out to North Sydney, I thought there's got to be a better way. I wasn't able to get my exercise in, which I was doing in Canada, and I needed some outlet. So I talked to some friends, and I talked about the idea of commuting by bike, and they assured me that yes, it is possible. I had some friends that had ridden a similar distance and a similar path. So I got up the courage, I went out, and I bought a commuter special. $500 from a bike shop, I've got myself a hybrid bike, and I can tell you, it is a beauty. I can't believe you can get such a decent bike for such a decent price. It's similar in structure to a mountain bike, which everybody's familiar with, but it has more in common actually with a road bike. It's got a slender frame. It does have the straight handlebars, but it doesn't have the shock absorbers at the front. It doesn't have a shock absorber on the pole. And my bike in particular doesn't even have padded gel seat, much to my very chagrin, I can assure you, for the first couple of weeks at least. But it's a fantastic bike. It's as light as a feather, for me anyway. So I bought the bike. Now I had to figure out how exactly to turn this dream into reality. I went onto an online website that specializes in bike rides and has a lot of bike rides throughout Sydney. And I was able to find out from Haverfield out to North Sydney, but it was a little light on the details in my neck of the woods in Croydon, so I had to go out and figure that bit out for myself. So the weekend that I bought the bike, hopped on, went out for a spin. I decided to take Frederick Street, which seemed where I am to be the most logical choice. I was doing well on the south side of Frederick Street. I don't know if you know the area, it doesn't really matter. Got across Parramatta Road, and that's where Frederick Street turns into Wattle and then metamorphosizes into the City West Link. It becomes much more serious, not something you want to cycle on. Now I knew this. I knew that I didn't want to be cycling with the traffic, but I thought there's got to be a way to do it. So I got up on the curbs. But what I didn't account for was the fact that this is a bicycle-unfriendly street. The curbs don't actually go down gently to let prams and wheelchairs through, or even illegal bicyclists. So I was jumping up and down the curbs on a bike that's really not designed for that. And then finally, the sidewalks just petered out completely. It's like, okay, this is not somewhere that people even want to walk. So I took a left, headed for home. Didn't have a viable route, but I had some valuable information, namely Frederick Street being where it's at. I did eventually find a route, and it's a really nice route. I get to go from 5 Dock through to Lilyfield via Haverfield along the water's edge in the mornings. It's fantastic. I get to go over 3 bridges. I go over the Anzac Bridge, through Darling Harbour, over the Piermont Bridge, and then over the Harbour Bridge with what is really, it's been described already as the jewel in Sydney's bicycle paths, the dedicated bike lane over the Harbour Bridge on the western side. It's something I knew existed, but I can tell you it's phenomenal to actually ride, and I get to do that twice a day. There are some hills, shall we say, along the way, and I have a love-hate relationship with them. The first hill I really encounter each day is at Lilyfield, going up Lilyfield Road. It got the better of me on the first day I ever took it. I ended up pushing the bike up, and I thought, this is not a great start. But I'm proud to say I've never gotten off the bike for that hill since. I've gotten down to some low gears, but I've never gotten off. So obviously, I'm getting better, I'm getting more fit as I go along, and good things are happening. As for the rest of the ride, I do have a love-hate relationship with the remainder of the hills. I find I've got a masochistic street, for example. I go over the Anzac Bridge, and it's actually a long, slow, gentle hill up the bridge. And I find myself thinking, I don't want to just be passed by everybody else by going the speed that I should be going. So I crank it up a notch or two. And I get going, and I get the legs pedaling till I master that gear. And then I go, crank it up a gear or two. So I either get to the top victorious, or the top gets to me and I have to crank it back up a layer or two, but I eventually get it. Either way, it means that I always arrive at work in a lather of sweat. Ew. Luckily for me, there are showers at work. Unluckily for the people that take the elevator with me, it's on the 40th floor. Oh. C'est la vie. Can't say that it's all roses, though. I did have my first accident 2 weeks ago. I was coming home, again near Frederick Street, and I was taking a bit of a shortcut, coming around a corner on the grass, about to get back up onto the concrete, and I managed to somehow lose control. I don't know what happened. The front tire went, and I was like, spring, flip, hands out, roll, roll, somehow managed to get straight to my feet, feeling a little bit good about that, grabbed the bike, tried to get back on it and get out of there, noticed the pedestrian looking at me concernedly, waved him away. I'm okay, nothing to see here, carry on, carry on. The chain's off. Got down, tried to fix the chain as hurriedly as possible, getting my hands filthy, thinking to myself, my wife did recommend that I take some moist towelettes, but I said, nah, I won't need those. Chain's fixed. Get up, get on the bike, get out of there as quickly as possible. As I'm riding over a little footbridge to get away from the road and away from the scene of my shame, I noticed that I had a big raw red patch on my wrist. And that my wrist was actually slightly sprained. I baby it the rest of the way home, thankfully only 10 minutes or so. And then it was 2 days of traveling on the train with the rest of the plebs. When I got to work the next day, I thanked the person that had actually wished me a safe trip home that day. He won't be doing that again, I assure you. So the one thing I did learn out of that, of course, is bicycle gloves are actually a good idea. So I invested in a couple of those. And hopefully I won't be scraping up the sides of my hands so badly next time. A bit of a sobering experience, but not as bad as some. I know we've got at least one motorcyclist in the room with us tonight. They don't tend to talk about accidents unless there's exposed bone or titanium wads involved. Preferably both, I imagine. But nevertheless, it was sobering for me. Not sobering enough to make me stop. I still love it, and it's something that I hope to continue to do. I find that I like cycling so much that I'd rather do it on a 35-degree day. I'd like to get out there, get sweaty, and get home, rather than sit on a train, not exercising, and still sweating. So this philosophy of mine, this new experience of like the bike, it may not last through winter and the dark afternoons, but I hope it does, because I'm getting exercise, I'm getting can work cheaply. And I'm like,